loose from infirmities and disabilities, loose from all that hinders me. Nothing can hold me now, I'm standing on solid ground, the word of the Lord. I've got the victory over my enemies. Who the Son sets free is free indeed. My chains are broken, thank God I am loose. Oh yes I am, yes I am. I am loose. Oh yes I am, yes I am. I am loose.
Greetings and shalom. I'm Dr. Joseph L. Williams, Senior Pastor of Salem Bible Church, and we're so thankful and glad that you've taken the time to join us on today. Here at Salem Bible Church, the place of peace, in our year 2021, we're calling it loosed, whereby we desire the Lord to loose us from any issue that we're dealing with. And the schematic layout of our season is one that incorporates 7 world-class speakers in various different fields of understanding that are in alignment with the 7 issues that people are dealing with. And being that we are in the midst of our Lenten season, the first issue that we'll be dealing with is that of arrogance. Now, as we talk about arrogance, those of you who are watching this, you've either dealt with arrogance yourself or you know that spirit that's on the inside of someone else. Sometimes it's easier to see arrogance in others than it is in yourself. Here at Salem Bible Church, the way it is organized and designed is for you to hear a message from a professional. You'll be hearing from a licensed professional on today. You'll get the introduction shortly. But after she presents on the subject matter, over the next 4 weeks after starting 1 week from today, we will be teaching it in the Word of God, aligning the issues of arrogance with biblical characters to bring it full circle for each of you who are participatory with us. We're going to do this 7 times this year. We're going to have 7 different speakers. This is the first one, 7 different Bible study series, 7 different ways for us to matriculate you to where at the end of this year, you can be loosed of whatever issue you're dealing with. Now, before we get into the introduction, if you are a person who desires to go through the Lenten season with us, you want access to our amazing devotional, all you have to do is to go to salembiblechurch.org, click on one of those banners. It can be any banner. You may see 21-day fast, anything with Lent or any type of graphic that you see that's in alignment with loosed, etc. You click on that. It'll help get you access to the information so you can matriculate with us, as well as you can become committed with us as we are progressing through this Lenten season. So I have with me our lead pastor of ministries, Pastor Latasha, on today. I'm going to ask her if she, at this time, can introduce our speaker for the day.
Thank you, Senior Pastor. Our first presenter or speaker for the Lent season is going to be Nakomi Higgins. Nakomi Higgins is a licensed psychotherapist, professor, and founder of Soul-Centered Life, a holistic mental health and wellness company designed to equip aspirational Black women with tools, resources, and support needed to become the most harmonious and truly confident version of themselves. She is also the author of Purposeful Perspectives, empowering Black women towards spiritual alignment, self-mastery, and joy. So without further ado, I introduce to you Nakomi Higgins.
Hello and welcome, Salem Bible Church, and thank you, Senior Pastor Dr. Joseph Williams and Pastor Emeritus Jasper Williams Jr. for having me. My name is Nakomi Higgins. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a professor of psychology, and the author of Purposeful Perspectives, empowering Black women towards spiritual enlightenment, self-mastery, and joy. And it is my privilege to unpack the character flaw of arrogance. Now, before we jump into the conversation today, I really want to go ahead and set the tone because I would like to talk about arrogance within the context of success and calling and purpose and healing. Kind of big and broad, but I'll bring it in for y'all, okay? But to do that effectively, what we are going to have to do is define arrogance. We're also going to differentiate arrogance from confidence. I want to explore the ways, or some of the more common ways, that arrogance present. We're going to examine its impact on our emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. And then we're also going to look at some keys that you can use to shift your mindset into a place of grace and gratitude. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. So a lot of times I get the question from my clients, how do you differentiate arrogance from confidence? And what I like to say is confidence is really rooted in the spirit of appreciation and gratitude. In fact, I really like this definition. Confidence is the feeling of self-assurance that comes from an appreciation of our abilities and of our qualities. So I want you to hold on to that, because when we're operating in confidence, we're operating in an appreciation, a gratitude of our gifts, our abilities, our skills. When we are operating from confidence, we make space and create space for others to lead. We create space for others to influence us positively, but also to influence. When we are operating in our confidence, we are allowing our service to guide us, okay? But there is also a definition for arrogance. And arrogance is more of an absorbing sense of one's own greatness. And I think we all have an image in our mind of what an arrogant person is like, how they carry themselves, how they can influence a room, how they show up in relationships, etc. And what we know is that this state of being, this way of showing up, can feel very toxic, can feel overbearing, it can feel even oppressive and isolating. But when I read this definition, and while it resonates and it makes sense, something in my spirit needed to go deeper. So I went into prayer and I went into meditation and I asked God, but how does arrogance show up for the person of faith who is working so hard to avoid being perceived as arrogant, right? What does it look like when you're consciously looking for those typical traits or qualities of arrogance? Judgment, being boisterous, making others feel small so that we can feel big, taking up too much space, bragging excessively, etc., etc. So what does it look like? And what became really clear to me over some time was that arrogance is this mindset of operating under the deception that our strength is our own, our faults are our own, our time is our own, our vision is our own, as well as our failures. So these covert ways that arrogance shows up are really rooted in this mindset of deception that our time is our own, our faults are our own, our vision is our own, and not of God's. Okay, so sit with that as we're moving through this conversation, because we're going to look at the common and covert examples of arrogance. Now, you might find that you can add to this list, but these are kind of the 4 common ways that really stood out to me. So the first is avoiding help. And the reason why I've opted to put this here on this list is because when we are operating in this avoidance of asking for help, 2, maybe even 3 things are happening. The first thing is we've convinced ourselves, we've adopted this voice that it is our responsibility and our job alone to move us forward. We are operating in this energy or the spirit of pride. And when we're operating under this energy of pride, not only are we potentially resisting resources that can help move us forward, but we're creating an unnecessary barrier between us and God and whatever guidance we have access to get to where we're going. Whether it be healing from depression or anxiety, I have had clients who have literally said, I've been wanting to call you for months now, but I just couldn't get around to it. I had to figure this stuff out myself. I got myself into it. I had to figure it out myself. Now, while I can understand where they're coming from, months have gone by in which they have been battling their depression, battling their anxiety, battling their fears, versus reaching out for that assistance, reaching out for that ally to help them combat the things that they're struggling with. That's wellness related. If we're looking at seeking help to start the business, to write the book, to put yourself in front of the right person, whatever it is that moves you through change and moves you towards growth, if help is something that you need, but you have refused to ask for it because you've adopted this mindset of pride that it is your job and your job alone to do it, then I'm here to tell you, you are being influenced by a covert way in which arrogance shows up. The next is procrastination. And I like to kind of share this quote when I am helping make the connection between procrastination and arrogance. Procrastination is an arrogant assumption that God will give you another day to do tomorrow what He ordained for you to complete today. When we're operating in this spirit or in this energy of procrastination, we are operating under this arrogant assumption that we have more than enough time, our time, to do whatever it is that we need to do to move us towards growth, to move us through discomfort, to face our fears. Again, operating in the sense of pride, operating in the sense of I and ownership. Okay. The next is I-oriented success. Now, I am sure, y'all, there is an easier way to say this, but I really can't come up with it right now. But when I am talking about I-oriented success, I read this somewhere and it really stood out to me. And basically, it was in reference to leadership. It was in reference to the difference between a confident leader and an arrogant leader. And essentially what it stated was, confident leaders make decisions for the kingdom. Arrogant leaders make decisions for their personal brands. When we are operating in a state of I, we are making decisions that influence our perception or how others perceive us. And so we're operating in the spirit of pride and power. And it's important for you to sit with that for a moment. Because while your intentions may be honest, it's so easy, and it happens in the language that is used. It's so easy to shift from I'm doing what God is calling me to do to I'm doing what I got to do to get ahead. It's a very subtle shift in the language, but it's a huge shift when we're talking about mindset and we're talking about impact. Again, I'm going to say that again. It's a subtle shift, subtle difference between I got to do what I have to do to serve God through my business, through my art, through my craft, and my family, versus I got to do what I got to do to get ahead. I got to do what I got to do to get paid. I got to do what I got to do to succeed. And we can get really, really wrapped up in what success looks like to the rest of the world. And while our spirit may not be consciously operating or knowing that it's operating in arrogance, I really want to bring it forth in saying that yes. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to separate there. But when we're operating from this place of I, especially within success, we are focusing on our brand versus our purpose and why we have been called to do the thing that we're doing. Now, the next is negotiating with God. And I can honestly say that I have definitely participated in this form of arrogance, or shown up in this form of arrogance. And that's primarily because, and I know I'm not the only one, when you have found yourself, you feel deep in your spirit that you're being called to do something. And while it's very, very exciting, the bigness of it is intimidating. The timing of it feels too soon. You feel like you're not ready. All of the things associated with your fear and self-doubt begin to creep into your mind, and you bring those fears and those doubts before God in the form of negotiating, asking for more time, asking for ways to circumvent the discomfort of the growth and the change that you're being called to move towards and through. It's really important to hear that, because negotiating with God is a huge form of arrogance. So I want to go ahead and make sure that I summarize. Again, these are just some of the common covert ways that arrogance manifests. You might come up with some others, and we know the common ones: judgment, being boisterous, making others feel small, this excessive sense of self, putting others down, being a know-it-all. All of these things, we know the common forms that arrogance shows up. And so often we try to avoid those common forms. But it's also important that we're aware of the covert ways. And these are just a few examples: avoiding help, operating in the spirit of pride; procrastination, operating in this assumption that you have more than enough time to do the thing that God is calling you to do; operating in this I-oriented success, focusing more on your brand and your purpose and what you're being called to do through your brand and your service. And then negotiating with God, allowing your fears, your doubts, all of the sum total of those things, bringing those to God in the form of negotiation versus saying, I'm scared and I don't know how to do this and I need help. Okay, so those are just the common ways that arrogance can manifest. Now, what I'll also say is that when we are operating in this cultivation of arrogance, okay, so when we're operating in arrogance that has been cultivated over time, what we position or what we expose ourselves to, or what we risk ourselves to experience, is incongruence. We become out of alignment. Now, to make sense of that, I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about the self. Now, I want to be honest with y'all. I'm taking all my years of education and I'm squeezing them into just these few little slides, but I think it will help, okay? So when I'm talking to my clients about the self, I try to explain who we are, how we show up in these three simple parts. The first part, or the first version of self, is the child or the younger self. This is the source of our creativity, our imagination. This is the holder of our spontaneity and our impulsive desires. It is the version of self, the part of self that is open to exploration and rebellion and fun. And there's so much more. But what's most important about this part of ourselves, it is the holder of meaning. When we were once children, when we were once young people, we were exposed to lessons and experiences. We observed things. We took in a lot of information. And as a result of that information that we took in, we created rules. We created beliefs. Rules that protect, rules that promote connection, beliefs that protect, beliefs that promote connection, beliefs and rules that we carry very much with ourselves to today. Okay. The next part of selves is what I call the ego, or I don't call it the ego. I'm not really creating that term, but the self of I. And what I mean by the self of I, this is the version of self that interfaces with the world. It is the holder of attachments. And by attachments, I mean labels. For example, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a professor, I'm a business owner, I'm an author. I am These are all of the things that we attach ourselves to season and give depth to our identities. So through the self, or through the self of I, we interface with the world. And it's important to know that everybody has an ego. We can't get rid of it. And it's not bad. However, it is subject to ego-driven fear. And ego-driven fear is very much different from biological fear, because biological fear is the result of true and present danger. It is the fear that ignites that fight or flight response. Ego-driven fear is connected to survival in a social world. So for example, we're afraid to lose our jobs. We're afraid of judgment. We're afraid of failing. We're afraid of making mistakes. We're afraid of being rejected. Through the self of I, the primary goal is survival. Survival, connection, to contribute and to be contributed to build our esteem, and to reach a place of self-acceptance as well as acceptance within the world. Okay? The next version of self is the higher self. And I call that, or I like to say that this version of self is the version of self that is closest to God. It is the most intuitive part of who we are. It is the holder of our wisdom, our hope, our faith, and our perspective. It is through this version of self that we tap into a deeper sense of knowing that we are part of something bigger, that we have purpose. It is the part of self that receives calling, and it's the most powerful part of self because it operates in the world from a sense of peace. Now, with that being said, these three parts of self kind of overlap. We all experience these parts of self in our day-to-day lives. Now, to the degree to which we experience them really are based on our spiritual practice, really based on our mental emotional wellness, et cetera, et cetera. But this is an idea of, or this image represents how these parts kind of coexist with one another. But the goal is congruence, okay? Congruence is when all of these parts come together in alignment to form one whole, in which they operate harmoniously, with our higher self being the main container and our self of I still being that version of self that interfaces with the world, but now within structure. So if we understand what congruence is, then we have to understand that incongruence is this sense of being where we're operating more in our self of I and our younger self and less in our higher self. So again, unchecked arrogance, cultivated arrogance over time can lead to a form of incongruence that can ultimately have you showing up less connected to your source of power, your source of faith, your source of hope, and more rooted in your sense of I, your impulsivity, your fears, your worries in the past. I hope that makes sense, because I want to really tie full circle that again, when we go unchecked, when our arrogance is unchecked, we essentially cultivate incongruence. And in operating in incongruence, we are essentially operating less in our higher self and more in our self of I and more in our self of our younger versions of ourselves, our impulsive, oriented selves. So what does that look like in simple terms? Again, when we are cultivating arrogance in our lives, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, we might find ourselves in that I orientation. Heightened fear of failing, perfectionism, imposter syndrome. We might become disoriented in the vision that we've been called to bring forth. And when I say disoriented, we lose sight of where we're going and why we're going there. When we are cultivating arrogance, we might find ourselves feeling complacent. We may begin to think that we've learned all that there is to learn, that we know enough, that we have found our rhythm and we're just kind of coasting at this point. We lose our hunger to learn more, to grow, and to expand our capacity to be more. And also we can become disconnected. And not just disconnected from those that we love, our relationships. We become disconnected from ourselves, our values, what really matters to us in life. And we become disconnected from God. God's call, God's guidance. So there's some big risks or consequences that can come with being unaware of how arrogance may be showing up for you and how you may be cultivating it in your life. So how do we keep our arrogance in check? Now, I have come up with about 7 keys, and you've probably can add to this list. But these are the things that have not only worked with me, but these are the things that I work with my clients to integrate into their own lives. So the first is you want to get oriented. If anything in this presentation really resonated with you, what I want to say is perfect, because now is the time to reorient yourself on what matters to you and what you're being called to do and to create in this life of yours, who you're being called to do it for. The next is be consistent in your practice. Again, one of the things that I remembered when I was putting together this presentation was when I was starting my business, when I didn't have enough clients coming in, when no one really knew what soul-centered life was and what I was trying to do in my business. Was I praying regularly? I was diligent every day, all day. But as soon as the success began to come in, the busyness began to emerge, I began to juggle more. I noticed more and more that my practice, my prayer, my meditation, my act of talking to God on a regular basis, it became less and less. I prioritized the brand before the relationship. And I was operating in arrogance. So if this resonates with you, understand that it is so important for you to reorient yourself and to be consistent in your practice of prayer, meditation, consulting with God on a regular basis. What I tell my clients a lot of times is it's so important that we get regular in consulting up before we consult out. The next thing I always encourage and have to practice as well is operating from gratitude and humility. Now, what we do know is that humility is the antidote to arrogance, but so is gratitude. And if we go back to that definition of confidence and the appreciation of one's gifts and qualities and abilities, we have to understand and create space for the important role that gratitude plays in our mental, emotional, and spiritual health and well-being. It also plays a significant role in our ability to maintain congruence or to achieve congruency. Okay. Next, take I out of the vision. I remember sitting down talking with my dad one day, and I was explaining to him how I was just so afraid of failing, and it was so important for me to succeed because I wanted to do the thing that God was calling me to do. I wanted to serve the women that God was bringing forth, but I wanted to grow my business. It was just very much in me, what I wanted. Now, I wasn't aware that I was using this language. I wasn't even aware that I was operating in this mindset of arrogance until my dad said, "Can I just pause you for a moment and remind you who you're doing this for? It's important that you take you out of it and you put who you're doing it for and why you're doing it in the forefront." I had to sit with that for a moment, and it was really powerful when I did, because what I understood is that when I'm able to remind myself who I'm doing it for and why I'm doing it, it's not that the fear and the self-doubt and the worry fades away. but it's more manageable because it's not about me anymore. So an important shift when you're leaving that mindset of arrogance, that mindset of I, is to take you out of the thing that you've been called to create, called to bring forth, the healing that you've been called to undergo, despite the discomfort. Take you out of it. Put your why, put your who in front of you. Next, we want to break that acting in the spirit of pride by allowing yourself to ask for help. Again, when we adopt that voice that tells us it is our job and our job alone to do the thing, because that is what will deem us worthy of God's love, worthy of God's approval, then we are operating in arrogance, because there's no rule that says you can't have help now, whether it's to heal, or whether it's to start a business, write a book, or whatever it is that you feel deeply driven towards that's scaring the crap out of you right now. Help is a necessary part of growth. Plants need water to help it grow. They need sun to help it grow. Growth and change are synonymous with assistance. So allow yourself to tap into it. And if you're not sure where to turn, this is the time to ask for the guidance, to tap into the resources that have been provided, created for you to get to where you want to go. Next, engage in life from a place of curiosity. This is a really important key for me that I have embraced fully in my life, because it minimizes or reduces that tendency to operate in judgment. When we can operate curiously, we can ask questions and we can listen. We can then take that information and process it on our own. And whatever we need to wrestle with or make better sense of, we can bring it up to God and ask, what do I do with this? And how do I move forward with this information? But operating from a place of curiosity keeps our minds open. Asking questions and listening takes us out of I and into a place of observing and being present in a different way. And then finally, be in community. And what I mean by being community is surround yourself with people who are also trying to practice reducing their cultivation of arrogance, right? We're gonna all experience it from time to time. It's so easy to slip into it. But surrounding yourself in a community of people who are gonna call you out when you have slipped in there or slipped into it is key. Remember, a person who operates from confidence is someone who wants to learn, but also wants to teach. A person who operates from confidence is a person who wants to serve and who also wants to share their abilities and their achievements. So when we're operating from confidence, we're operating from this place of humility that allows us to be the student in this world, as well as the teacher. So that's it, guys. I have gone through the entire unpacking of the character flaw arrogance, and I really do hope that this conversation kind of resonated with you. And if you are not someone who is practicing or not practicing, but experiencing arrogance, maybe some of the stuff didn't really resonate. Maybe it resonates with, or it could be helpful information that you can bring to someone else who you know is operating in somebody's arrogance. But with that being said, I really thank you guys so much for giving me the opportunity to just hold space for this conversation. If you enjoyed it, you can read more of my style of talking about life in my book, Purposeful Perspectives, Empowering Black Women Towards Spiritual Enlightenment, Self-Mastery and Joy. I also have a self-mastery reflection card deck. You can purchase both on Amazon or Etsy. And I always want to encourage my listeners to stay in touch. You can follow me on Instagram at Nakomi Higgins _LMFT. You can also shoot me an email if you enjoyed this talk, or if you have questions, or just have some thoughts that you want to share. And then you can also always find me on my website at www.soulcenteredlife.com. Until then, guys, I appreciate you so much for giving me your time this year. Wishing you all happiness, success, peace, and joy.
Wow, what a dynamic word. I hope you were excited just as much as I am. If you thought that was something, you wait for the next 6 speakers that we're going to have, which is a part of our loose theme. So don't forget to stay tuned here on our Salem Bible Ministries Facebook page, as well as salembiblechurch.org for our next presenters. Don't forget, you can get all of your Lenten material by going to salembiblechurch.org. Click on the banner that says A Change of Heart, the Vaccine of Arrogance. There you can register for small groups, get your devotional, as well as the 21-day fast. I look forward to seeing you next time.
I am loose from infirmities and disabilities, loose from all that hinders me. Nothing can hold me now. I'm standing on solid ground. The word of the Lord. I've got the victory over my enemies. Who the sun sets free is free indeed.